families do when they gather for celebrations or the loss of loved ones is do a lot of reflection, a lot of storytelling, a lot of thinking about the past. And we certainly did a lot of that. And also, being from the East Coast, funerals and services are still very traditional, with the viewing, the funeral home, and a full funeral service. And for me, I've said this to people already, it was an exercise in luminosity.com as people come up to me and say, "You probably don't remember me." You know, some 30, 40 years ago. But the other thing was the compliments that people give to the loved one that has passed away. And one of the things that I heard on a number of occasions was, you know, your mom was a real saint. And I reflected on that on the long and arduous plane trip back, which included a bit of not feeling all that good physically. I thought a lot about that, and I knew that this morning I would share with you along that topic. Because today, Christians around the world observe All Saints' Day. A day in which we celebrate our communion with saints in heaven and here on earth. But we do so in different ways and for different reasons, depending upon which denominational, religious faith stripe one might be. And so, I'm going to try to honor us all this morning, and then ask you a question. During its first 300 years, the church was more or less a persecuted sect. And so Christians celebrated their leaders, their heroes, and especially martyrs of the faith. Literature of the 4th century indicates that churches honored saints in the liturgies. Churches were named after saints. I think you probably recognize that as you read the odd church sign. Relics were collected and honored. The dates of their deaths were commemorated. And special communion services were held at their tombs. Churches were even built over their tombs. And the church eventually concluded that all believers who had died, and not just famous saints, should rightly be commemorated. And so All Saints' Day took final form in the year 835. So it's been around for a little while. When Pope Gregory IV ordered the Feasts of All Saints to be universally observed on November 1st. Eastern Orthodox churches observe All Saints' Day on the first Sunday after Pentecost. But for their part, of course, we Protestants had a different view. We generally get positively nervous about celebrating the saints. We're much more comfortable celebrating Reformation Day on October 31st than All Saints' Day. Protestants point to the superstitions that developed across the centuries, and then, of course, our great hero Luther, in his Wittenberg Declaration, he said, Prince Frederick the Wise had an extraordinary cache of sacred relics, an illustrated catalog by Lucas Canrock in 1509 listed 5,005 articles. A tooth from Jerome, 3 pieces of Mary's cloak, a piece of gold from the 3 wise men, a piece of bread from the Last Supper, a strand from Jesus' beard, and on it goes. And by 1520, the collection had grown to some 19,013 pieces. Now, these distortions made Luther's blood boil. And he said this: "What lies there are about relics. Our claims to have a feather from the wing of the angel Gabriel, and the Bishop of Mainz has a twig from Moses' burning bush. And how does it happen that 18 apostles are buried in Germany when Christ only had 12? But I think for Luther, what got him really cranked up was that the church displayed these relics. And along with it came one of the early fundraising processes. Long before ATM machines and online giving, you could reduce some of your purgatory time if you made a contribution. Of course, that led to Luther's conflict of the soul. Now, having just been in Ireland, having walked on the ground of some of the saints that we have, there is a very important process and element and component to all of those people who have been sainted. We're Protestants. Beginning to wonder what that means, but we are Protestants. And we get nervous about this blurring the boundaries between honoring saints and worshiping them. But Protestants emphasize a distinction that both Catholics and Orthodox acknowledge, and so we're in this together, folks. And that is this: as Christians, we honor or we venerate the saints, but we don't worship them. Worship is due to God alone. This is what Bernard of Clairvaux wrote in the 1100s. He said, "The saints have no need of honor from us. Neither does our devotion add the slightest thing to what is theirs. Clearly, if we venerate their memory, it serves us, not them. But I tell you, when I think of them, I feel myself inflamed by tremendous yearning. I feel myself inflamed by tremendous yearning." As Christ followers, we maintain that all believers, not a few that we identify and put up there on higher pedestals, are called to be saints. Paul tells us that in Romans. We prefer the plural saints, which includes all believers. The Apostle Creed says, "I believe in the communion of saints," as opposed to the singular saint, which suggests an exalted status. But Paul addressed all of his letters to all the saints in Rome and in Ephesus and Philippi. And when I read that, I realize that in some way I'm a saint not because of what I've done, not because of my virtuous character or my performance of miracles, but I'm a saint because God calls me to himself. Oh, we're all familiar perhaps with Luther's one great phrase, simul justus et peccator. Every believer is simultaneously a saint and a sinner. And friends, every one of us is an awkward mix of both. But we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is our sometimes nemesis. We shouldn't dismiss a practice because it's abused. Every practice, regardless of what it is, at some point gets abused. We can do a better job of honoring the role that the saints can play in our lives, especially for us who, in stressing the personal nature of salvation, we often slide into this individual, private, and almost narcissistic pattern of discipleship, as if I've got something that somebody else doesn't have. We should see ourselves as part of the greater community of God, wherever it gathers, wherever it joins to worship. There's a social and a corporate dimension to our journey with Jesus that rightly includes the saints. When I think about the saints, whether the especially holy like Mother Teresa, or the fragmently fallen like a Jimmy Swaggart, I'm reminded that my choices matter. My choices matter. And my choices have consequences for my spiritual welfare. Every one of them. Believers are told to imitate not only Christ, but the saints. Paul urged his readers to imitate his way of life several times over and over. Hebrews 6:12 commands us to imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what has been promised. Other saints, by the choices they've made, Paul writes to Timothy, have shipwrecked their faith. And we do well to consider them. And in addition to imitation, there is consolation. The saints remind me that I'm not alone. Rather, I'm surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses who cheer me on to run with endurance the race that is set before me. And so here's the question I want to ask this morning. Do you want to be a saint? Do you want to be a saint? I'm going to tell a story anyway. We have lunch, so I'll abuse that time a little bit. This is the story of a young Thomas Merton. And it's taken from his book, The Seven-Story Mountain. A young Thomas Merton walks down 6th Avenue with his friend Lax on their way to Greenwich Village. The street was all torn up and trenched and banked high with dirt marked out with red lanterns where they were digging the subway. And we picked our way along the fronts of the dark little stores on our way to the village. Merton writes that the moment turned out to be historical as far as my own soul is concerned. Lax puts into Merton's mind the unexpected thought that he could desire to be a saint. I forgot what we were arguing about, but in the end, Lax suddenly turned around and asked me the question, what do you want to be anyway? What do you want to be anyway? I could not say. I want to be Thomas Merton, the well-known writer of all those book reviews in the back pages of the Times Book Review. Or Thomas Merton, the assistant instructor of freshman English at the New Life Social Institute for Progress and Culture. So I put the thing on the spiritual plane, where I knew it belonged, and said, I don't know. I guess what I want to be is a good Catholic. What do you mean you want to be a good Catholic? Lax asked him. The explanation I gave was lame enough and expressed my confusion and betrayed how little I had really thought about it at all. But Lax didn't accept it. What you should say, he told me, what you should say is that you want to be a saint. A saint? The thought struck me as a little weird, I said. How do you expect me to become a saint? And his answer was, by wanting to. By wanting to. I can't be a saint. I said, I can't be a saint. And my mind darkened with a confusion of realities and unrealities, the knowledge of my own sins and the false humility which makes men say that they cannot do the things that they must do, cannot reach the levels that they must reach, the cowardice that says, I am satisfied to save my soul, to keep out of mortal sin, but which means by those words, I do not want to give up my sins and my attachments. A saint. By wanting to. So I ask you, do you want to be a saint? Do we want to be saints? Wherever I am on the Christian pilgrimage, in joy or despair, faith or doubt, sin or grace, many millions of believers have gone before me. Some have failed, others have triumphed, but at the end of the race, whether they ran well or they ran poorly, they found ultimate rest in God's grace. Part saint, part sinner. In her new book, Pastor Nadia Boltz-Weber might just sum it all up. Her new book is entitled Accidental Saints, Finding God in All the Wrong People. So celebrate the saints. We need both perspectives. For we need them to challenge us and to inspire us and to console us and to encourage us for all the normal struggles of life. And so find a fellow saint. Find a fellow saint and share your own journey with Jesus, encouraging one another to love and good works. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for calling us into this wonderful, troubling, encouraging, often frustrating world of sainthood. But may we understand that incredible call on our lives, and may we adhere to that which Jesus asked us to do, to unbind and let go. To live as your hands and your feet in this world in which you have called us into. We pray, seeking the power and the encouragement and the strength